This episode is brought to you by Struzy Golf. Hey coaches out there, what I'm about to share with you is for the 1% who are ready to finally take their business to the next level. If you're ready to grow and evolve as a business owner, keep listening. I'm a coach just like you. I want more time to invest in my players, build my skills, and spend it with my family. We also both struggle with the idea of taking time off and sacrificing revenue. Coaches like us need tools to save time, automate admin tasks, and deliver excellent player experiences every single time. What if I told you there is a platform that captures 37% net new revenue in the first 60 days? It only takes 5 minutes to set up, and a simple copy-paste puts the rest on autopilot. As a founder and CEO of your business, you would fire yourself for not taking advantage of this value. Download a Struzy right now and start the journey to modernizing your business. Oh, and when you create your account, don't forget to add an asterisk, that little star thing on your keyboard, to your last name so they know the guru sent you. If you aren't convinced just yet, keep listening to learn more. Now let's get back to the show.
It's not what you know, it's what you can prove.
You know how to cut to the core of me, Baxter. You're so wise. You're like a miniature Buddha covered in hair.
I want to become a guru so girls will like me. Then I will like myself.
Now, before we do this, let's go over the ground rules. Rule number 1. No touching of the hair or face.
Of course.
And that's it! Now let's do this!
Are you not entertained? Are you not entertained? Is this not why you are here?
What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Golf Guru Show. I'm your host, Jason Sutton, and I am the Guru. Also the Director of Instruction at the beautiful Colleton River Club in Bluffton, South Carolina, where it is my mission to break down high performers in the teaching and coaching business in all fields of study. Unpack and tease out what they do great and what makes them successful. Please make sure you download this episode and hit that purple subscribe button so you don't miss out on future episodes that will be coming your way. All I ask is that you share this podcast on social or with your friends and with other coaches and players that might benefit from this information. I'm very excited tonight as my guest is my good friend, Jason Birnbaum. You can follow Jason on the gram at Jason Birnbaum Golf. Jason is the Director of Instruction at Manhattan Woods Country Club in West Nayak, New York. He was recently voted as Golf Digest Best in State Teacher in New York for 2002-2003 and is one of the newest members of the Golf Magazine Top 100 list, which is a huge honor. Congratulations. Jason is a very talented instructor. He works with players on the PGA, LPGA, European, and Korn Ferry tours. Some of Jason's past and present students include Jim McGovern, Oliver Wilson, Alexander Roca, Robert Diaz, and Chris Gotterup, the young superstar and Haskins Award winner that will be making his PGA Tour debut in 2024, which we discuss in depth in this conversation. We cover a myriad of topics from what he has learned from his mentors like Mitchell Spearman and many others to what he is working on with a few of his players like Chris Gotterup, which is super interesting. There's a ton of great information and takeaways that we can learn from this convo, and I really enjoyed this one. It was so good. So without further delay, here is myself and Jason Birnbaum. Enjoy. All right, Jason Birnbaum, welcome to the show, man. I appreciate you taking the time. I'm excited to chat it up with you.
Me too. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. So we recently just met like face to face. I think we knew of each other, obviously, through social media, but we met at Jim McLean's workshop a couple of weeks ago where we both presented. And I thought I would start there because I thought it was interesting. We were having breakfast with Jimmy and you asked me what episode of the show that I thought was your favorite, and I had no idea. And you told me it was the Oliver Wilson episode.
That's right.
Right. So I think it's a good lead in for, how your career path is taken, but tell me why you answered it that way and then kind of give us some lineage of your career and how you got there.
Yeah, that was an easy one for me. I've listened to a lot of the podcasts that you've done, but that Ollie one just kind of struck a little bit closer to home, just knowing Ollie as well as I do and having worked with him closely for a couple of years there in the I guess, early 2000s it was. I mean, just the ups and downs. I mean, he is really the epitome of sort of the top of the top and then the bottom of the bottom and then back up to the top again. I mean, that hasn't happened too often. But so Ollie it's interesting. So when I first started, I mentioned to you when we were down at Jim's school down there, I was probably a junior in college playing golf at a small Division I school in Connecticut called Quinnipiac University. And I had taken lessons my whole junior career. And for whatever reason, when I went away to college, I stopped taking lessons and I wasn't playing great at that particular time. And I needed to work on my game. So I opened up Golf Magazine and saw this guy's name in the magazine, Mitchell Spearman. And I had never heard of Mitchell before, and it said he was based at Manhattan Woods, and I'd never heard of Manhattan Woods before. So I called Mitchell for a golf lesson. I scheduled a lesson, and I drove 2 hours to get to that lesson with Mitchell. And when I got there, he asked me if I knew how much money he charged, which I did not. And just didn't dawn on me to ask that question for some reason. I was a little young and naive at that time. So I had $200 or $300 in my pocket and figured it couldn't be a whole lot more than that. It turns out it was $1,200 for the golf lesson, one of the world's most expensive golf teachers, and didn't tell me that on the phone. So I was pretty embarrassed and felt bad for wasting his time and apologized to him. And he felt bad that I drove so far to get there. So he invited me to breakfast that day at Manhattan Woods. And at the table, he kind of took a liking to me over the course of our hour breakfast. And he offered me a job at the table to sort of be his right-hand man and his assistant, which was an amazing opportunity. And I didn't have to think too hard before I accepted the position. And I kind of had my school schedule set so that all my classes were early in the week. And then I would have a lot of time mid and later in the week to drive down there and work for him. So it was an amazing experience. And our arrangement was that I would work for him for 1 full year for free. And I would do anything he asked me. I'd pick him up at the airport, drop him off at the airport, clean the bathroom, set up the range. And I watched every lesson he gave for a year, stood there with a tape recorder and a camera and a notebook and really learned a lot about teaching golf. And he basically said, you do these things for me and I'll teach you how to teach golf. And that's what I did. And I learned a ton. Mitchell was teaching some great players at that time, Craig Parry, Nick Faldo, Jay Siegel. And one of them was Oliver Wilson. And Oliver had just graduated from school at Augusta State. And he and I kind of started with Mitchell at the same time. I was starting my apprenticeship with him, and they shared an agent together, Rocky Hambrick at the time, and Oliver hooked up with Mitchell. And I'll never forget that first time we met. Oliver came straight from the Walker Cup. He had just played and beat Bill Haas in a singles match, and he was really sort of one of the first lessons that Mitchell ever gave when I saw him show up there. And it was fascinating. He showed up on the range and really didn't know too much about his golf swing and sitting these big high cuts. And I remember Mitchell had him hit 3 irons and just these big high hands and arms at the top and kind of swiping across it. But just a great guy. And, you could tell he was a good player. He drove it great and putted it great. And I remember saying, this guy's, kind of struggling with his swing and doesn't know too much about his swing. And he's gotten to this level and played like this despite all those things. So his talent level was just unbelievable. And him and I were pretty much the same age at that point. We would have been, sort of early 20s. So that was sort of, it was interesting because Mitchell was pretty busy then. So he obviously he was overseeing it, but he kind of allowed me to sort of work with Ollie a little bit under his tutelage. He'd sort of give me a list of things to keep an eye on with Oliver. And I would travel down to Augusta State actually after Ollie graduated. He had an apartment down there and stayed at school so that he could use their practice facilities and work on his game. So I would go down there. I'd stay with him in his apartment at Augusta State and help him get ready for, things like Q School and some big events that he was playing. And it was unbelievable experience. And the podcast you did with him brought back some good memories.
Yeah, it was cool. It forced me to go back and listen to it. And I'm like, man, this was really, really good. He was at my house, which was super cool. We talked about, did he ever get him shallowed out?
A little bit for sure. No, we had that bungee cord around the right arm. It was a lot of right arm stuff and trying to get things, a little bit deeper and shallow it out. And yeah, no, he actually came a long way. Mitchell did a really good job with him. And, he was sort of a tinker, as he touched on in the podcast with you, and loved to sort of get into it and work on it. He probably wasn't into the fitness side of it as much then as he came into, but yeah, always I was just really impressive. I mean, he was I remember being at Doral with him when he got all the way up to top 50 in the world, and he would always, his bad rounds would always kind of hover around, sort of 1 over, 2 over, even par. He'd never sort of shoot real high score. And then he was always good for a 64 or 65 at some point in there. And I'll never forget that. One of those last times I was with him was at Doral there, which was a long time ago. And, sort of a couple mediocre rounds around par, a couple over, and then he'll go shoot 8 under. And next thing you know, he's top 5 at a WGC event. But just to, as a young teaching pro, it was, seeing a grinder like that, you always sort of have this picture in your mind of tour pros are perfect. So seeing him sort of struggle with certain things, but be great at other things, and just sort of plot his way around the golf course. I mean, he was like an assassin around working his way around a golf course, so to speak. So that was, looking back, really unbelievable for me to see from a teaching standpoint at a young age. And there were a lot of, early on, there were a lot of experiences for me, maybe not planned under Mitchell, but that sort of, really sort of shaped the way that I teach and made me, have to sort of learn quickly as well. I'll never forget the one real thing that sticks with me too is, at the time, Mitchell was working with Craig Parry, great golfer, Australian guy, won some big events, actually won Doral holding out a shot, I'm sure you remember. And Craig had a really sort of unorthodox, over the top swing, and not something that you see too often on tour. And one of the first tour events that I ever went to with Mitchell was to work with Craig at Colonial, which was, funny enough, the year Annika Sorenstam played with the men. It was like the first ever time an LPGA golfer was playing with the men. So it was a ton of hoopla around that event. And I went out there with Mitchell to work with Craig. And while we were out there, Mark McCormick, who was the head of IMG at sort of the brains behind IMG, he had passed away that week. And Mitchell was very close with Mark from his IMG days with Ledbetter and some other things that he had done with that company. So he had to leave to go to Mark's funeral services. And he left me there with Craig. And I had never really been to a tour event, and I was just out of college, and I was still learning from him. And, next thing you know, I'm standing behind Craig Parry on the range at Colonial. He's made millions of dollars playing golf, and he's making swings and turning around and asking me how it looks. And, what do you think of this position? So that, it was an amazing learning experience, and sort of learning on the fly, and just being around great people like that, like Craig and Ollie, was really influential and sort of how I grew up teaching.
That was what I was going to ask. A follow-up is like, what do you do with that guy, right? It's like, that was the classic. Everybody's probably heard the comment Johnny Miller made was, this guy looks like his golf swing looks like a 15 handicap. Like,
yeah, I believe when he won that event at Doral, Johnny Miller said that Ben Hogan was rolling over in his grave, I think was the comment that he made. But it was another one of these things. Yeah, I mean, it works, right? So you look at the areas that he was great at. I was a great wedge player. He aimed in a way that he never let his misses get him into trouble that much. And he had a one-dimensional swing. So he knew where the golf ball was going. It was either fading 5 yards or it was fading 20 yards.
Yeah.
So he aimed left enough so that if it faded, 5 yards, he was okay. If it faded 10, he was perfect. And if it faded 20, he was still okay. But just, again, a smart guy, good driver of the ball. It's funny, like these guys, some of these guys like Ollie and Craig, they knew what they were great at. They hit it in the fairway. They putted it well. They were good wedge players. And they just sort of kept pounding home those things that they were good at. It's something I even think we touched on it at Jim McLean's seminar. Mm-hmm. I mean, everybody's trying to get better in so many areas, and it's like sometimes you just got to keep getting better at the things you're already good at. I mean, that's really probably would help so many different levels of players, but that's what those guys were. They knew what they were good at, and they just sort of kept pounding home those things. Obviously, they want to get better in all areas, but you got to be really good at what you're really good at, so to speak.
Yeah, and I'm going to ask you about some of your other mentors or influences, but what were the qualities that you took from Mitchell or things that kind of stick with you now as far as like how that's molded you into how you coach now?
Yeah, a couple things. One is, the diagnosis of the whole thing was super important. On Mitchell's sort of the theme to how he was doing things at that time was sort of, I'm trying to get them to hit it better quickly, basically. It's like if someone's on the right track, they should be hitting it better quickly. That doesn't mean they're going to take it to the course, or that doesn't mean they're going to score better in a golf tournament. But they shouldn't hit it worse if you give them good information, so to speak, and sort of without being a Band-Aid fix. What do we need to do face and path wise right away that would just like eliminate the miss right away and get the good shots more consistently better. So that was big. He was very good at that. He was very good at communication and sort of really being in command of the lesson tee, right? It's like when he was, by charging the amount that he was charging, he was obviously attracting, high influential business people to the lesson tee that had a lot of wealth, and they weren't, used to being told what to do, right? When they're sitting in a boardroom, they're ruining they're ruling the boardroom. So having them on the range and seeing him in control of them, and, sort of the communication and the sternness that he was using and not doubting himself. And those were all sort of key qualities that I take into my lessons even today. It's like, if you're confident in the diagnosis, you just got to stick with it. I feel like so many young teachers now, when a lesson is struggling in front of them, they're just trying to find ways to help them. And before you know it, they're giving them 20 things to work on. So as a teacher, if you're confident in what you've picked to work on with this person, you just got to keep sticking with it and pound it home, because they will get it. But yeah, that would be the answer. I'd say there's just the communication aspect of it, the presence of controlling the lesson tee, being calm and patient and things like that. That was probably, those were days where we didn't have launch monitors and didn't have iPhones.
Yeah, right.
So yeah, it was the old handheld Casio and drawn lines with Sharpies on the big screen TVs. But it worked. It was effective. And yeah, if you had a good eye and you had good communication skills, you can get them hitting it pretty quickly.
Like what? $700 an hour or something crazy back in those
Mitchell
days?
wouldn't give an hour lesson back in those days. So it was either 3 hours for 1,800 or 2 hours for 12. And it's interesting seeing, money aside, the rate aside, there's just so many things you've got to do to play good golf, right? There's short game, there's long game, there's course management, there's fitness, there's mental, there's so many different components. And, the 30-minute lesson or even the 60-minute lesson, I mean, it's really hard to make a dent in someone's game in that amount of time. So when I first started, I was like, gosh, 3 hours. I mean, how are we going to be with this guy for 3 hours? But it really, when you have 3 hours with him, and it really provides such a sort of laid back, nothing's rushed and you can take your time and there's really no pressure. And, you do the assessment and then you do the video and then you take a look at it, take a break, explain it to them, do the video again, show them the before and after, and work your way down through the bag and then go do some short game and then go play a couple holes. I mean, it was really, I've taken that into a lot of my teaching today. I do a lot of 2-hour lessons where I'll work in a couple holes on the golf course, and because it's just, you're able to touch on multiple things. I'd much prefer to work with someone once or twice a month for 3 to 4 hours than once a week for an hour a week. It's just hard to do things in an hour. Now listen, the 30-minute lesson, the 45-minute lesson, the hour, I mean, that's effective. If someone's struggling with something or they need a tip to get them in a little bit better position, that's one thing. But if you're really trying to help someone 2 to 3 hours, you can really get a lot of work done. And that was something that he had down to a science there.
I mean, that's how we were sort of trained when I first started teaching full time. It's like, that'll quicken your decision making really fast or you're going to fail. It's
right.
like,
yeah, for sure.
I don't enjoy it, but I do a lot of them now just because I got an older clientele and sometimes they can only last 30 minutes. It's like 15 minutes of coaching and then 15 minutes of supervision and then we're done. You're right. It's
right.
Like,
yeah. And I have found that, like, teaching juniors, I teach a lot of juniors, a lot of good elite players, and they're very similar to the Tour Pro sort of approach. The sort of the teenagers that I'm teaching, high school and college kids, they're sort of taking the Tour Pro approach when it comes to practice and what they're working on and the routine that they're working on it with in preparation and all that stuff. But yeah, I mean, most golfers, if they have the time, they would all benefit from sort of taking that approach.
Yeah, for sure. Who are some of your other influences? Any other mentors that have come alongside you?
For sure. Yeah. Pre-Mitchell. I mean, I one of the reasons why I went to school where I did was because the coach we had was unbelievable coach. I played college golf for this guy named Bill Schaff, who was sort of a legendary Connecticut PGA professional teaching pro. And he was an older guy by the time I got there, but he was unbelievable communicator and teacher. And he took a liking to me early on because he could tell the way my mind was working and how I was sort of always, I had my own video camera when I was in college and I was always looking at the swing and didn't know what I was looking at that time, but I was at least looking.
Yeah.
Other kids on the team were asking, they knew I knew a little bit about what I was looking at. So they would ask me for some advice and tips, but Bill was a big influence, just seeing the way he used to explain that he had to us that he sort of had a blackboard in his mind. And on one side was sort of an image of how he thought your swing should look. And then the other side of it was what it actually looked like. And he sort of had this photographic memory that he talked a lot about. And he was a good player and good communicator. So having those things early on pre-Mitchell was big. And then obviously the 4 or 5 years that I spent with Mitchell and doing all the things that I did with him were really big. Hank Haney was a big one really early on for me because I did a couple of certification things with Hank sort of towards the end of my Mitchell run. And, being a sort of ball flight guy and face and path guy and eliminating the biggest miss kind of teacher, Hank was really sort of fit that mold to a T, right? So that was some of the time spent many hours watching Hank teach and listening to him speak and being around him and asking questions. And he definitely had a little bit of an influence on how I was viewing things and cause and effects kinds of stuff. Spent a lot of time with Martin Hall. I was doing some Golf Channel Academy stuff early on, and Martin was a big part of that. And just, so good. I mean, just controlling the room and knowing what to say and when to say it and what training aids to use, and just smart guy and easy to be around. And you just knew, being with those kinds of teachers, that they really care about how you're, they want you to get better, right? I mean, they want you to get better, and you get that vibe from them early on. But I'd say Hank and Mitchell and Martin, they were probably, I watched Todd Soanes teach a lot, got family in Chicago, and Todd was close by, and I would visit them a lot and hang out with Todd. And he's just, that was interesting because he was more of a short game guy at that time. So he was doing a lot of cool putting stuff and putter fittings and, fitting you based on the stroke you had and sort of doing those things in conjunction with each other. So I've spent quite a bit of time with Todd, and seeing him with a different part of the game like that was really cool too.
Yeah, I had him down to when I was at Dana's actually to do a school together before I left there. And yeah, he's the first guy that sort of, I think, got the fitting part in putting correct, right? Fitting players to good posture as opposed to, shitty setups.
Right.
The tri-spec, I remember he had the tri-spec and he had his putters and stuff, and we did really well with that. Todd's a great guy. Yeah, is Mitchell still coaching? Like, what is he? We've not kept in touch much. I don't know. Actually. I just hadn't heard much. It's interesting because I just remember that back in my early days, I just remember seeing what he was charging and thought that was kind of fascinating. I know he's a good coach, but I was thinking I hadn't really heard, what he's actually doing now.
Yeah, back to his rates and all that stuff. So when he was coaching under Ledbetter and working in Florida, he was teaching in group instruction. He was teaching sort of 5 people at a time and charging $300 a person for 3 hours. So he was making $1,500 teaching 3 people at a time. And then he came to New York and, sort of branched out on his own and opened up the Academy of Manhattan Woods. And he started by doing the exact same thing, small group instruction, but in the city.
Way ahead of his time.
In the city, though, with people's schedules and everything was hectic, and there's a lot of wealth in the city, and people want you to themselves. So he said a guy called him for a golf lesson, and Mitchell said, this is the date I have available, but I've got to find 2 other people for you to take the lesson with me. So the guy said, no, I want to have this entire lesson to myself. So Mitchell said, you're going to have to pay for those guys not to be there. So it's, at the time it was $1,500. So the guy said, no problem. Came by himself, 3 hours, $1,500. Loved it. Told Mitchell it was the best $1,500 he ever spent, and it was an amazing experience. And ever since then, he had started doing the one-on-ones for $500-$600 an hour. But that's how the whole thing started. Do you ever remember a guy or ever met a guy named Robert Baker? Do you remember that guy? He was a Ledbetter guy. Yeah. All those Ledbetter guys. I mean, so many good ones. Gary Gilchrist and Jonathan Yarwood, and they kind of all. Andrew Rice, I think, was a part of that whole thing in the beginning. And Mitchell was one of the older guys at that time, I believe. And I think Robert was working under Mitchell pretty early on in those sort of probably late 80s, early 90s years. But I do remember Robert. Yeah, he was sort of based in Miami, if I recall.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so let's move on to some of your players, because I mean, you're working with a ton of good, touring professionals, and then I think not that he's the most famous, but Chris Gotterup is kind of your guy that's gotten the most attention. You're just coming out of college and then now going to be on the PGA Tour, right?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, unbelievable. Cool it's really cool. It's been an amazing run. He's an awesome kid, and the interesting thing with Chris is really how long we've been working together. I mean, he's going to be a rookie on the PGA Tour in 2024, but I've been coaching Chris for about 9 years. We started when he was a sophomore in high school, and it's been pretty special. He's unbelievable talent, and he is the real deal, and he's sort of sky's the limit kind of generational talent, in my opinion. And it's been amazing. But yeah, I mean, Chris's dad, Morton, don't really remember how he found me, but he found me and he booked a lesson. And I think he might even booked a lesson online. It was, like I said, 9 years ago. I was teaching at Alpine Country Club at the time. And we also started in the winter time. I think it was like December or January, the first ever time I gave Chris a lesson. And yeah, I didn't really know who he was before we went into the lesson. He was just a high school golfer, and saw Chris Gotterup's name in my schedule and showed up to work that day. And he sort of comes in and swinging the club over 120 miles an hour as a sophomore in high school. He's a big kid and pounded. I was
going to say, what was his? I mean, we talked about it, and I've heard some other interviews. I didn't know if you knew how fast he was when he was 13 or 14 when you said he was 120 at that point.
He was pushing that. He was probably high teens. Yeah,
which is pretty unusual for that age. Yeah,
unbelievable. He was a lacrosse player, and he actually gives, even to this day, lacrosse quite a bit of credit for his power and speed. And I don't know too much about lacrosse, but the way that you move that stick around and leverage it, and you almost have it going, one end's going in one direction and the other end's going the other. It is an interesting action as it relates to golf, and it does make a little bit of sense to me just with how he would, how you'd leverage the stick to sort of create some speed. But yeah, so he showed up, and he was similar to Oliver, big slicer of the ball. It was sort of a one-directional big fade even on the good ones, and a massive slice on the bad ones. And typical of a strong long hitter. He didn't have a great wedge game at that time when we started, so his wedges was kind of be all over the map, and hit the irons, got away with the irons, decent iron player. But the driver was kind of a mess. He'd hit it amazing, but there'd be sort of 2 or 3 drives off the map around that would go out of bounds, and you make a double or a triple on those holes, and it's hard to score. Interestingly, looking back at the whole thing, starting with him indoors in the winter was huge, because I probably coached him for months before I ever saw him hit a golf ball outside off grass.
Yeah, that can be helpful, right? Working on the motion and not worrying so much about the outcome.
Exactly. That in retrospect was probably a huge part of our success, because we're really able to zero in on some things with swing plane and angles and look at numbers. And there were no tournaments for a while, and he was in high school then, so the high school season didn't even start until the following spring. So we had a lot of time to be able to do some work before he ever cared about where the ball was going, and that was really, really helpful, really, for both of us, but especially for me to have his attention on the technical aspect of it. But yeah, because of all of those things, and because of that big miss that he had and the speed that he had before he learned how to sort of harness it, he really wasn't very heavily recruited out of high school. So Rutgers was one of the only. That
was what was interesting. Yeah, it was like I've heard some of his interviews, and he didn't have that many options before he went to Rutgers, which was kind of I was like, really. Yeah. I mean, I guess the speed obviously would get some attention, but obviously you got to shoot the scores. So and I got so many questions. I want to talk technique as far, because you showed me some videos of him, and you guys have made some pretty, I would call, substantial changes for a guy that, now that I feel like I know him, because I've heard you guys on a couple of podcasts and interviews, that he's not a super technical kid, very feel based or whatever you want to call it. They still got to get some information, but you've kind of spoon feeding the changes. The lacrosse thing's interesting, because I've actually worked with some like high level lacrosse players over the years. I had like some professionals, and I never really found that they had a lot of speed. What I found that the way, and I'm, nobody's going to see this on the podcast, but the way they cradle the ball in the net, they actually tend to have more of an open club face because their lead wrist extends more. Okay. So I don't know if you found that with him. Like, that's what I've seen a lot of lacrosse players. They're obviously athletic, but I just think the kid's he's just got some God, gift.
Yeah. It seems like with the lacrosse stuff, there's a lot of twisting going on of the stick. I mean, there's a lot of that. The wrists are constantly going flexion, extension, sort of the whole time. Yeah. So, learning how to work your wrist probably naturally and subconsciously was probably a big part of, as we know from gears and some of these other machines, there's so much twisting and torquing, and, you talk about it, drive yourself crazy talking about alpha and gamma torque, right? But he was probably doing a lot of those things and creating a lot of those things without even realizing it. And it's carried over into golf pretty well.
Crazy.
But I would say his sophomore year in college, his second year at Rutgers was when things started to really start to materialize. He started playing in some big events, learning how to play under pressure, playing in cold weather environment, sort of really toughened him up a little bit as well. He lost a lot of weight as well.
He 50 pounds, right?
Yeah, he got into the gym and probably for the first time ever. And that had a big influence on his swing, because there were parts of his swing like setup and posture and different things like that because of the physical aspects were inconsistent. And those things started to get a lot more consistent and tighten up just when he got his body right and in a little bit better shape and just sort of giving that part of the whole ball of wax the attention that it deserved. And then that made a big influence. He had a big summer there, and then sort of nationally started to get a little bit more attention. And I would say, just from our standpoint, I'd say that the majority of the work that we did good work with was the driver. So we basically just, he was already hitting unbelievable drives. So by eliminating that huge miss and, those 1, 2, 3 balls that he was hitting out of bounds around that were messing up his scorecard, once we eliminated those, that really made life a little bit easier. I'd say wedges and driver is probably the two areas that we've done the most work and had the most success with. But so from a technical standpoint, these guys that move the ball a lot, to me, are the easiest ones to fix. Not fix is probably not the right word, but the easiest ones to improve and tighten up the ball flight and the dispersion, right? So, I mean, some of the numbers that I have on from Chris from those early days, I mean, they're really, 15 out to in, 13 out to in. I mean, there's a lot of digging, there's a lot of path in there. So when we were able to keep the path out to in, if you will, but minimize it, I mean, it just made a huge, because he wasn't going to draw the ball at that, especially at that point in time. He can draw it now when he's got to, but when you're 10 plus degrees in one direction, I mean, you're not going to go the opposite direction, right? He's not going to hook the ball. He's not going to hit big draws. So if we could just cut it less, I mean, it would just make a huge difference. So we basically, through things like ball position and alignment and connection with his arms and the direction the club was pointing at the top, I sort of felt if I could put a couple of draw characteristics into his swing, keeping the left arm a little bit lower and more around him on the backswing and getting the club pointing maybe a little bit more across at the top, setting up so that the ball position was a little bit further back and the aim wasn't as far left. Those to me were all things that promoted a bit of in to out. And for him, really, they just promoted less out to in. So we were able to get that path to a more controllable sort of 4, 5, 6 degrees. The other thing too is when
balanced, right? I mean, it's just all like we talked about. It's like we're just trying to go the opposite way of the miss, and so kind of to paint the picture a little bit, because you're doing a great job of describing that. But when we were talking, having a beer at the bar the other night, it's like he had a very sort of vertical arm plane. I mean, the shaft was coming in like, it's kind of crazy how like the shaft's coming in like above his right shoulder in the downswing early days.
Yeah, he'd have
right?
his hands. Yeah, his handle was really high to dress. He sort of had this very upright setup look and a really open, not open, but just aimed pretty far left, a little open, but more aimed left than open, sort of sending the swing direction way to the left and the handle high. And then this sort of big extension reach, arms away from him towards the top. And then, that left arm would kind of ride a little bit high and lift up. And then he would just sort of slash straight down on it.
Crazy, just athletic, right? Just, I mean, it's just athleticism trumping technique in spades. And then you showed me the video where you guys definitely got his, hands lower, hand path a bit more in at 2, arms and arm structure was way, way better at the top, which kind of like allowed him to hit more like shallow cuts. So I would say where he could really use his pivot and smash it. Did you ever was there ever, and this is, I'm always curious about really good players, how much work did you do on club face control, and how, if there is any work to do, like what did you do?
Yeah, good question. I'd say the majority of the work that we did was more path related. As the path got better, like if we fast forward all the way to like present day where we are right now, where the path is way, way more under control and rarely getting to those high numbers again, then it becomes a little bit more about the face. So like, for example, right now when things are off a little bit, so before when things were off, he'd curve it too much. He doesn't curve it too much. Obviously, sometimes it happens. It's just golf. But majority of the time when he's off now, it's more about his start lines.
So more of a pull? Or
no, he'll actually start the ball too straight before it cuts, or
I
got start a little. So he's always hitting the cut.
Gotcha.
He's always got the 4, 5, 6 degrees across to create some cut spin. But sometimes the face will be too zeroed out, and the ball will start straight or slightly right and then cut. That is very, very, very rarely missing left. So grip is one thing for him that he's sometimes struggles with. The grip will get a little bit. He likes to have he's a strong guy. Coming back to lacrosse stuff, he likes to hit it hard and pound it. He likes to have the club in the finger. So once in a while, the club will gravitate towards being a little bit too high in the palm of his left hand, and it'll be a little bit more difficult to have the face under control. So
what's his grip style? Is it? I didn't look at the face on super close. Is it more what we call neutral-ish, or is it?
I would say it's a little bit more on the stronger side.
On the stronger side, okay.
Yeah,
Which
a little bit more on the stronger side.
Being a fader.
For sure. Yeah, because we want the face to be, like I said, when he's off, the face gets a little open. So, we're doing a lot of things right now with like a little bit more right hand on top on the takeaway and try to feel like the face is looking at the ball a little bit longer into the beginning of the backswing there. We'll work some upper body tilt sometimes, left shoulder, chest sort of going down a little bit to help get the sort of right side high and keep the face down, so to speak, off the ball. But yeah, as the swing has gotten better and as the ball flight has gotten tighter, the dispersion's gotten tighter, the face is probably something that we look at more often than we used to. It used to be all path. Yeah. Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah. It's just the epitome of a late bloomer, right? I mean, then he goes Power 5 and then, wins the Haskins Award. I mean, storybook deal, right? I mean, it's just unbelievable.
And when you look at his swing, I mean, it's pretty cool. There's a lot of Hogan in there. I mean, there's some Jack Nicklaus in there. There's a little bit of everything. I would say, so he got his 5th year eligibility because of COVID. So he had an opportunity to do his 5th year and transfer, and he went to Oklahoma. And that was another sort of, like I mentioned, that sophomore year at Rutgers when he got more fit and eliminated some big misses, and he took his game to another level. And then when he went to Oklahoma, he took it to another level on top of that, playing for Coach Hibble there and being in that environment of structure and preparation and playing in the wind as often as he did out there and practicing in the wind, sort of that helped playing in the events that he was playing in, which was much more strength of field and good golf courses. And that was another step in that direction of getting to the next level.
This episode of the Golf Guru Show is brought to you by our new partners, Astruzi. Listen up, coaches. What I'm about to share is different than what you've come to expect from the guru. Normally, I'm the one asking the perfect questions to tease out the secrets, tips, and lessons learned from the best and brightest in our industry has to offer. This time around, I want to share some perspective. You're a business owner, right? You're a solopreneur. You're the founder, CEO, admin, sales, and marketing department. Like you, I often daydream about a world where these no longer consume our valuable time and energy. All of this takes us away from high-value time in the lab developing our players. If some days you feel like Bill Murray from Groundhog Day and your business is slowly sending you into an early grave, well, thankfully, I can say from personal experience, relief is only 5 minutes away. And I know you have 5 minutes. Coaches, if you have a Gmail account, an iPhone or an iPad, have your own LLC, constantly switch between 4 to 5 different services to run your business, charge at least $70 per lesson, or deliver at least 15 hours of lessons per week, then pay close attention because I'm talking directly to you. Astruzi is a business management platform where you finally offload all those wasted hours in admin tasks and get back to doing what we love, coaching your players, nerding out on ball flight laws, and about a million other things you would prefer more. If your business would benefit from 37% net new revenue, Astruzi is for you. If you struggle to build accountability with your players and dream of staggering 71.4% swing analysis viewer rate, Astruzi is for you. If you want a platform that protects and amplifies the decades of experience Instead of allowing players to window shop 5 different coaches only to choose the cheapest one or the cheapest option, Estruzi is for you. If you have no idea where to begin, Estruzi is for you. I personally have an account and can vouch for the value that Estruzi delivers. The download link is in the show notes, or head to estruzi.com to download the app. When you create your account, don't forget to add an asterisk to your last name so they know that the guru sent you. Go to estruzi.com today. My other question, which I found was interesting looking at his video, was the way his lower body works, right? And more of almost a little bit of a reverse hip shift, right, as we were kind of talking about. Like that's so, like a lot of times we would change that. I mean, my follow-up question or just topic was, have you ever had him on force plates?
We have not. That is definitely...
That would be super interesting to see the way he moves, his torques and forces, and the trace would be, I'm guessing, because it's cool because he doesn't slide past it, right? It's like he manages that forward piece very, very nicely, which is, I think, is why he hits it so hard.
Yeah, for sure. Speed. No, that's on our list of things to have data on, just so we can see where he's at. It'll probably be more for me to be looking at than him to be looking at.
It's just for having a baseline information for you, right, to see kind of where when he's hitting it good. Yeah. But I thought that was one of the questions I wish I would have asked you when we first met him. Like, have you ever had that kid on any kind of force plate? Because I mean, I bet he's just destroying the numbers.
Yes.
I mean, if we're talking 130 club head speed. I mean,
we've got him last year. We got up to 133 in practice, but I would say cruising speed is probably more like 127.
Yeah, it looked like on the PGA stats it was like 125 and a half, and he doesn't even have that many drives yet because he's only played a few events. But he'll clearly lead in that category next year.
Yeah, he led the Corn Ferry this year in driving distance, and I would say it's about, when he's practicing and wants to get it up, he's probably pushing 130, but cruising speed on the course is probably a little bit more like 127, 126.
Insane.
Yeah.
So talk about his other attributes, like the mental side, and just, I mean, he seems like such a chill kid that has a pretty good head on his shoulders as far as just, the emotional piece.
Yes, for sure. I mean, one of the best that I've ever worked with at that level in terms of that. I mean, he's very relaxed. He played 7 PGA Tour events last summer, a lot of invitations that he got from being the Haskins and the Nicklaus winner and being the number 1 college player in the world, and also some events that he qualified for on his own, like US Open at Brookline. He handled those events so well. And it's just natural. It's really, I remember he played Puerto Rico and finished, I think, 7th in Puerto Rico when he was still in college. He played that event as a college kid, and he was near the lead going into the last round. And I mean, he was like oversleeping that morning. His parents had to wake him up because he's, it's just, you can't teach those. Yeah. Right. I mean, I couldn't sleep myself waiting to watch that round. So to have that naturally is obviously a big, big help. I'd say that's probably super high on the list. And he's made great strides with short game, especially putting. That was probably one of the weaker parts of his game. Even in college, when he got to that next level and started playing great golf, he was probably doing a lot of that. I think he would tell you, in spite of some poor putting weeks, a little bit streaky with the putter. And the putter has gotten a lot more consistent. I mean, he was, I believe, between 30 or 35 in putting on Corn Ferry Tour this year. And that's an amazing stat for him. I mean, if he could drive it like he does and hit it like he does, if he could be top 30 in the world in putting, that would just really change everything. But he's probably given a little bit more time and attention to the putter, which is sort of obviously an important aspect of the whole thing. And he's probably given that a little bit more attention, the attention that it deserves. I think as he's gotten better, that was an area that was lacking a little bit. And this year was probably as good as I've seen him putt since I've met him. So that's a huge part of it. And just the confidence that he'll have. A lot of kids in his boat, they're starting their PGA Tour career. There's always a little bit of doubt. Right? Can I do it? Am I good enough? And he's already done it. I mean, the way that he played in the US, his first major last year, the US Open, finishing like he did, finished 4th at John Deere and top 10 as a college player in Puerto Rico. So he's had enough good finishes in big events on big stages to sort of know going into it that he can do it. Obviously, it's going to take a lot of work, and there's going to be some ups and downs, and he knows that going into it. But there's somewhere in the back of your mind where it's like, all right, I've already done it before, so I know I can do it. Less doubt.
Yeah, I love the story that you told on one of your other interviews about you taking him to a tour event when he was just a junior golfer.
Right.
And the guys that he was watching and whatever, and he, I guess, secretly told you afterwards, he goes, I can beat those guys.
That's right. Yeah, we were at the
I
Travelers
love that
Championship.
confidence.
Yeah, that was with great. I mean, we were with Joaquin Neiman and Abraham Answer and playing a practice round around there. And he walked out of there saying, I'm not too far behind these guys. And I was like, hell yeah.
I love it. Yeah, that's like stuff, like you said, you can't teach that, right? It's just like having that inner confidence. And I don't think he's a cocky kid at all, right? I mean, it's just,
not
in
any way, shape, or form.
It's just self-belief and knowing that he can compete, which is super cool. How was he able to improve his putting and short game? I'm curious, did you consult another coach? Did you teach him some stuff, or what was the process there? And what does he do in his practice?
A couple things. First off, just giving it some more attention, I think was big. Practicing it more, having some drills and training aids, that he knows works for him, and giving it a little bit more of the time that it deserves. Coach at school has been huge for him. Coach Hibble has been really helpful for him with short game stuff. That was something that he drove home during that last year that he played there in Oklahoma, and it really helped him with his putting. And he's a good player. He's a good putter himself. So Chris trusts his eye. He started working with Ramon Buscanza, who owns the Perfect Putter, and works with a bunch of guys out there.
I know Ramon.
Yeah, we've done a lot of work with Ramon this year, and he's most likely going to continue that work. Ramon's been great for him, and Ramon was a good player himself, and he's got sort of that playing mentality, and he just kind of fits right into Chris's MO. He's not too technical, and he's good with, sort of some structure and a plan and training aid or a drill that's going to help him. And he's really good with practice and routine and warm up. And what am I working on the practice screen before I tee off in the tournament and things like that. So yeah, just bringing a little bit of structure, consulting with the right guys, and giving it some attention. I mean, he's a really quick learner. I've said this a few times to some different people. If you give him something, anything, whether it's for the putter or for the driver, and, sort of have him try something that feels good to him, he's going to get it pretty quickly. He's going to implement it pretty quickly. He's going to sort of maybe put his feel and his spin on whatever it is you're talking about. But he's a really, really quick learner. And that's another thing you can't teach. And he's pretty naturally good at that.
All right. So talk about a couple of your other players that you're working with. I'm not going to name any names because I know players come and go a little bit, but like who else are you working with out there on tour?
Yeah. So there's two of the kids I'm working with in college right now that I've got sort of really high hopes for that are great players. Jack Walls is also a New Jersey guy. Actually went to high school.
I know
with Chris.
Jack very well.
Yeah. Do you?
That is
Jack,
awesome. Him and my son are good friends.
Nice. Yeah, so Jack's going to Texas Tech. He went to USC, transferred to Texas Tech. So him and Chris actually played high school golf together. He's a little bit younger than Chris, but they were on the same high school.
He reminds me a lot of Chris.
He's got a lot of Chris in him, yeah. So Jack, he played at Riviera this past year. He got a spot in Genesis. He won a college event that qualified for that, and he played the Corn Ferry Tour this year at Matita in New Jersey, which was kind of his home event. So I've been working with Jack for a couple of years now. Really, really talented player. Very excited about where he's headed. He's got a lot of those same attributes: crazy club head speed, bombs it, big, strong guy, and sort of has that sort of same laid back attitude and a lot of those things that we've been discussing that are hard to teach. So he's been a joy to work with. I've been having a good time with that. Yeah. Nathan Hahn is a kid that I'm coaching right now who plays golf at Columbia, the Ivy Leagues, one of the best players in the Ivy Leagues. He's had a really, really good last year or two. Played great, played in the USAM this year where you were out at the USAM this year, right?
That's right.
Yeah, Nathan played the USAM this year. So he's played really, really good in a lot of big local events around here. And so these kids are they're just coming out. It's interesting, like going back to where we started this whole talk with Ollie. So I remember Mitchell was working with a couple really good All-Americans at that time, and Oliver was on the top of the list, sort of going back to early 2000. And these kids would come out of school, and they were so talented, and they were obviously very good, but they had no chance at playing professional golf. I mean, no chance. If it's just the way college golf was at that time or the way the system was at that time, the early 2000s. But I mean, you watch these guys on the range and it's like, there's just no way this guy can compete at the highest level, even though he's having great success in college. And, you see go through Q school, like just using Ollie as an example. I mean, probably went to US Q school, I don't know, 3 or 4 times and didn't have a chance and didn't even get through first stage. Now it's like these kids coming out of college are like, it's just a different ballgame. I mean, obviously it's a testament to college golf and college golf coaches and how they've sort of changed things. But I mean, kids coming out of college now can win on the PGA Tour. Obviously, I mean, we've seen people do it. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah. So that part of it is just, I mean, college golf is just, these kids are, whether it's PGA Tour University is helpful with that, or kids are getting more sponsor exemptions and college facilities and the technology are better than they were. I mean, there's probably not one thing. It's probably a bunch of things, but the fact of the matter is that college golf these days is just unbelievably different than it was 20 years ago in terms of preparing guys and girls coming out of school. I'm having a good time working with some of these college kids because they're kind of fearless, and they know they're good enough, and they're seeing kids that they like played in a college event with recently that are now having success on tour right away. And it just gives them a ton of confidence coming out of there. And it's really cool.
So much more prepared than they ever have been, which is crazy, I'm still blown away by Herberg, or however you say his proper pronunciation, of like a kid coming out of college and now he's on the Ryder Cup. And he's favored this week at RSM.
Yeah. No,
I'm like, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you watch him and it's like, everything's just good, right? It's not like mind blowing, but it's just really good in every area and no real weakness, and confident, and it does, drives it good, hits it good, and putts it good.
Drives it the best of anybody. Yeah. That kind of leads me into one of my questions is like with junior development, like what are your thoughts on like how you structure your training? Like what are the pieces that, because you remember hearing my talk about my kids and how I'm spending a lot more time on the golf course than I ever was before. I used to grind on technique so much. Like how do you sort of, you can go in a lot of different directions, obviously, in this topic, but a typical scenario of like how you would take a good junior player along that's going to have the goal of playing college golf.
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm sure there, like you said, a number of different directions you can go in with that. I'd say, sort of taking the tour pro, the quote unquote tour pro environment and trying to bring that to juniors is really where it's at for me, taking a little bit more of like a sort of holistic approach. And it's like, all right, we got these 5 or 6 areas, right? We got the fitness aspect, we got the mental aspect, we've got the course management aspect, and then we've got all these different parts of the game, long game, short game, and equipment is huge. So right. I try to, when it's a kid that's got, obviously a little bit of talent and also the drive and dedication to get to the highest level and to play at the highest level, I really try to break it down into all of those categories and sort of assess them and sort of make a mini plan for each one. A lot of times that will mean bringing in outside experts to help them with their game, which is, nothing different from what I'm doing with Chris, right? He's struggling with the putting. Ramon comes in, helps out. Chris has been really paying attention more to short game and chipping, and Gabe Yetstedt's been someone that we've done a lot of consulting with, and he started working with Chris a little bit. So as a coach, you can't have too much of an ego and not want to sort of reach out. Andrew Rice is another one who's really helped some of my tour guys get better with wedges and short game stuff. So I think you got to be good in so many areas now to play golf at a high level, juniors especially. Yeah. And you got to really pay attention to all areas. You don't have to be amazing in all areas, but you got to find the areas you're good at and keep them good. And you got to find the areas that you're bad at and just get them a little bit better. So that's kind of been my approach to working with the kids, is just to put attention in all areas, always have a little bit of a plan, always have a little bit of structure around what they're doing. And then it's like, you just let their sort of talent take over from there.
How often are you seeing those kids? Like if a kid comes to you and you see that prospect of, I'm going to play Division I golf and he's got a chance and he's local, like what do you recommend?
So everyone has always wanted the once a week, 1 hour lesson. So I've tried to go a little bit more of the every other week for 2 to 3 hour route, because I feel like in 2 to 3 hours, I can give them enough info and enough things to sort of then take and go work on their own. And the other thing with me is I'm big like with trends. So even with the guys on tour that I have coached or am coaching, I don't like going out there every single week because it's just too hard. The game's too hard. And it's like, all right, they're missing a little left this week. We fix that. And then next week they're missing a little right. And then you fix that. And then it's back to left again. It's like if you let these great golfers sort of go on their own for a couple of weeks, there is a trend that's right. Great golfers, they don't hit slices and hooks, right? They have a miss and it shows up. And sometimes it's happening a little bit more than others, but in a 2 to 3 week time frame, it's enough time for some sort of trends to stick out a little bit. And then it becomes an easier fix for the coach. Things are off a little bit more glaringly after 2 to 3 weeks on the road than they are from a day-to-day standpoint. And I like to take that same approach with the kids as well. It's like, if we can do 2 to 3 hours every 2 to 3 weeks, it's easier to fix, and it's easier for you to then, then they don't become too dependent on the coach, so to speak.
What technology are you using? I know you're a TrackMan guy still, yeah?
Yeah, mainly TrackMan. I actually use Hack Motion quite a bit. I like the Hack Motion a lot if that happens to be something that we're working on, like with face control. But I use OnForm for the video analysis aspect of it.
OnForm. I've never heard of that.
Yeah, check it. It was Huddle, I think.
Oh,
Huddle.
Gotcha. Yeah, yep.
I think they took over.
Yeah.
I think they took over Huddle, but check out
Gotcha.
OnForm. It's really good. They've got some really cool things that they can do with split screens and mirror imaging and stuff like that. They've got a good database of swings as well. But I'm probably using TrackMan and OnForm and video analysis more than anything else. We have Body Track, use it a little bit. We have KVest, use it a little bit. Hack Motion, use it a little bit. But most lessons, I'm using TrackMan and video analysis.
Yeah, I like it. I think we teach very similar. I think we're very compatible in kind of the way we coach, I think. I just wrote down a couple of things. This is just so random that kind of pop up for me. And I actually tagged this. When's the last time you told a student that they have too much shaft lean?
Oh, that's pretty rare. That would be, it's happened. It's happened before, for sure.
Yeah.
I don't know if too much shaft lean is the word, but I mean, there's some version of holding on to it, right? But yeah, it definitely has never happened with a high handicap player. I would say one thing though that I have evolved with as a teacher is how to help someone attain shaft lean over the years, right?
Good.
I mean,
that's my next question.
I would think, old school way, it's like, all right, you get the impact bag out and you got the handle way ahead and maybe give them some forward press at address. And, next thing you know, they're shanking it and hit it to the right because, they're just holding on and holding it open. So that's one area actually where Hack Motion has helped me the most. Like if you can, from the top, right, in transition, if you can get someone to sort of work the face a little bit and get the lead wrist going into a little bit more flexion and feeling like they're closing the face a little bit sooner in transition, it's amazing how that then leads to a little bit more shaft lean, right? Torquing the club in the right way in transition and getting those things in order way before impact really changes impact quite a bit. That's probably something that has really helped for me. Something as simple as putting the magnet on the face with the arrow on there and saying, okay, let's get this thing to the top. And I want you to get the arrow kind of pointing at the ball a little bit sooner coming down. And by the time they get to impact with those thoughts, the handle end of the club is way ahead of the head end. But yeah, finding different ways to create some of that angle, I think is helpful. Even things like ropes, like some of the things the Mach 3 guys do with ropes and how you sort of turn and twist those things is helpful. Yeah.
The rope is pretty good. Yeah, because that's like the conundrum I think that I've kind of ran into and I've got my thoughts and ideas. It's like if you get somebody, this is the average golfer. I mean, even one of my better juniors dumps it a little bit and he's more of a shut face player, which, that could be another discussion. But let's say you got the backswing and the top of swing that you like, and then transition's pretty good. Shape of the downswing is pretty good. And then they're dumping it at the bottom. It's like, where do you go from there? Right. It's like, how do you, like, I've got some drills that I give people that, tend to help. But I think that's one of the most difficult things to change because obviously it's happening in a blink, right? We're talking about the fastest part of the golf swing, arguably. So it's like any ideas or thoughts on you got that player.
It's also one of those areas where if you do decide to work on that, they start hitting it pretty bad at first, right? There's some.
They could if they do it wrong.
Yeah. I would say, though, when things are looking good like that, and when things are looking like they're pretty good and then leading to that early extension at impact, I would be looking more at body stuff is there stalling going on? Is the pivot,
right.
What's going on with pivot through the ball? And I will also try to change the low point, right? I'm trying to explain.
Well, that does change low point. That's
right.
The point. Like, it's like that, why is shaft lean important? Because it moves low point towards target, right? That's
right.
I think the conundrum of, my number one mastermind skill is like controlling low point, but I know there's a lot that goes into that. It could be
for sure
any number of things.
It's interesting. It's like if you have a student that has a little bit of like swing knowledge, a little bit of an understanding of the numbers, but they're struggling. I've had these sessions with golfers, with students, where it's like I said, they know a little bit about the swing, they know a little bit about the numbers, and I'll show them their low point, and it's not where it needs to be. And I'll explain to them what that number is, and I'll explain to them what that number needs to be. And I won't even really say, I'll just say, listen, hit a couple shots here and try to get this number a little bit more ahead, right? What do you need to do? You need to change your weight distribution. You need to change your setup. Can you hit this golf ball? Maybe do something like put a lie board or a towel behind the ball to obviously move the low point more forward. And it's pretty fascinating. Yeah, exactly.
Or they hit the towel.
Fascinating though. Exactly. It's pretty fascinating though to sometimes see them have a way of getting, because it happens quite often where I'll say something like that, and sure enough, this person they'll move the numbers a little bit. I mean, there's some numbers that are hard to move. Obviously, that's one that's not the easiest. But my long answer to your question is I'd probably be looking for some body stuff and pivot stuff and things I can do to get the low point more forward.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, it's like, what do you like to see numbers wise? As far like when you're talking about low point, like how far ahead, like just say ball on the ground, right? Like 8, 7, 6 iron or whatever. Yeah. That we're mostly teaching
probably,
with.
3 to 4 ahead.
Yeah. 3 to 4 inches ahead, 3 or 4 or 5 down.
Yep.
Yeah. I always say the holy grail is if we can get them moving the club from in to out and get the low point forward. That's pretty good for our average golfers to and be able to control the face. But yeah, there's so much involved there. Like it's such an interesting discussion. And I've been digging into like so many things, trying to create less net force with the trail arm and the right hand. And I don't know.
Yeah. One thing that I've been looking at a little bit too, one of the guys from Swingbox came out. Is that what it's called? Yeah. Sportsbox.
Sportsbox AI.
Sportsbox AI came out, and it measures grip speed, which I thought was just an interesting number to look at, because a lot of those golfers, it's like the grip was kind of slowing down too much, and then the head end's kind of speeding up a little bit, and they're getting a little bit of that. So messing around with that thing and seeing how changing, just getting someone to feel like they're moving the grip end with a little bit more speed.
Love that.
Was good, because I feel like everyone, especially students, they're always looking at the head end. They're seeing the early release. They're seeing the club dump at the bottom. They're, what they're calling flip or handsy, and they're always relating it to the head end of the club. And I feel like I'm trying to get their mind a little bit more toward the grip end of the club and what the grip is doing in space. And that has helped a little bit with that stuff as well.
Yes, swing the handle. Right. I mean, I think that's a fantastic sort of idea concept, because I understand the lead wrist is moving towards extension, like we've talked about all this stuff, but I haven't seen anybody good on tour that looks like this, handle. I don't see too many right pocket impact positions on tour. Right. Like they're leaning the shit out of that thing and learn how to manage the face, right? It's like there's so much conflict going on with each hand, which I think is another thing that somebody's obviously going to come out with, like how to measure the force. But we already know from 3D that the hands are fighting one another, right? And when that right hand wins, I think the left hand loses. That's a big part of it. But you're right. It's like pivot. It's like sequence. It's just so complicated. I think down by the ball.
That pro sender thing's actually pretty cool. Have you messed around with that at all?
I haven't got it yet. Yeah, I'm going to get Foley. Get me one, but
I actually had never seen it. Jack Wall actually showed up for a session not too long ago, and he had one. He picked one up, and just the way that thing kind of presets your right wrist in order to have your wrist in the pro sender correctly, it really kind of creates a little bit of that angle in the right wrist. And I thought that thing was pretty cool, actually. That thing.
Yeah, I might have to get one just to mess around with it, but yeah, it's an interesting topic. All right. So a couple of personal development sort of topics and questions. You talked in your presentation about self-awareness. It's like, how do you think, or can that be trained for young coaches? And I'll piggyback that with just advice to the young coaches. But I think that's such an important part of it. And I think you do a great job clearly with what you do, adapting to your players. What are your thoughts on that piece? Because you did speak a lot about that in your presentation.
Yeah, I think just building trust in the relationship with the student and making them feel comfortable. First and foremost, that's like so big for me. And I think any teacher would benefit from really getting to know their student and what their goals are, and even a little bit about their personal life and what they're like off the course and their interests, so to speak, because it just puts them at ease and puts them into a little bit more of a position where they're trusting what you're saying and they know how much you want to help them. And it just sort of helps set the tone. I think, one thing I used to do a lot of is I used to film myself teaching. I used to just set the camera up on the tripod. Student didn't even know I was doing it, and just sort of watch the whole sort of vibe of the lesson. And,
great
I'd be
exercise.
talking too fast or saying things too quickly in terms of coming at them with too much information or not doing enough demonstration, and being able to see it was helpful for me. In terms of young teachers, I think teaching a lot, I think, is really important. Whether they're good lessons or bad lessons, I mean, we've all given plenty of bad golf lessons, especially early on. I'm certainly on the list of giving bad lessons early on before I really knew what I was looking at and doing. But the more you teach, the better you get quickly at all aspects of teaching, from a communication standpoint to a knowledge standpoint, analysis, and being able to fix things. That you just got to be teaching a lot. The more you can teach, the better. So that would be at the top of my list, would just be teach as much as possible. I mean, give free,
even if it's for free, right? I think I love that part of your story was I'm going to work for free the first year. Like that's such a great testament to why you're so great.
Go to the local driving range in town and go walk the line and give golfers free tips. I mean, that's a good way to get better quickly, right? And teaching golf. So that would be on the top of the list. And a close second would just be observing great teachers. I mean, that was just, I couldn't get enough of that. And I still love shadowing teachers and watching teachers do things. And I mean, it doesn't even have to be a golf teacher, really. It could be any teacher. Right. I was actually teaching a surgeon recently. Can't remember what kind of surgeon he was, but he was actually telling me that he hires another surgeon to watch him operate once in a while. And I thought that was really kind of cool. We're always going to see other people teach. But if we had a great teacher come watch us teach, that puts a little
feedback.
That puts a little pressure on you.
Yeah, I think I always do my best work when I have shadows.
Yeah.
Right? Because
exactly.
you're really trying to do your best. Yeah, keep you honest. Yeah. That's fantastic. All right, man. So you've been unbelievable with your time, and I've really enjoyed this conversation. So you got to answer one more question, and then any other topics that you want to discuss. We got plenty of time, but I don't want to take up too much. So if you had a gigantic billboard and you had to get a message to the world, to billions of people, what would be your message and why?
I've listened to enough of your podcast. You'd think I would have thought about that ahead of time and given it some thought. I would say I keep it simple. Just say, do the right thing. That's what my billboard would say, right? I mean, this day and age, I mean, exactly. It's like, it sounds simple. I said it to my kids, just do the right thing. Whatever you think is the right decision. If we all did the right thing, the world would be a little bit of a better place, I think.
I love it. The right thing's always the right thing.
Exactly.
Yeah. Anything I have not asked you that you wanted to discuss, or any ask of the audience?
No, I appreciate having me on. I mean, like you said, I agree. We got a lot of the same sort of thoughts and philosophical things that we are pretty similar on. And it's like, I mean, all good coaches in all walks of life, not just golf instruction, and all after the same thing, right? Just getting their student to be better. So I appreciate you letting me spew some of my info tonight and talk about some stories.
No, it was fantastic, man. So tell the listeners how they can follow you on socials, get a hold of you.
Yep. So I'm on Instagram and Twitter. Instagram is at Jason Birnbaum Golf, and my Twitter handle is at Birnbaum Golf. And I'm at Manhattan Woods Golf Club, Manhattan Woods Golf Academy. That office that I used to clean for Mitchell every day is my office now, and I'm the director of instruction at that original club. So it kind of came full circle there. But I love doing it, and can't wait to keep getting better at teaching golf.
There you go, my man. Well, keep up your great work, and I know we'll keep in contact and anything I can do for you.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Appreciate you.
Awesome. Thanks, Jason.
You got it. What's up, everyone? Guru back here again with a couple of things before you jump off. First, big thank you to Jason for coming on the show and sharing his incredible insight about golf instruction. I know all of you, including myself, got something out of that. Make us better coaches out there for sure. Make sure you follow Jay on the gram and Twitter at Jason Birnbaum Golf, and give him a social wave and tell him thank you. Also, big thank you to our new sponsor and partners, Estruzi. Make sure you go download the app and check it out, and make sure that you add the asterisk after your name so we know that you heard it on the show. Very, very important. Follow me on the gram and Twitter at Golf Guru TV. And if you have a question or comment, you can email the show at golfgurushow@gmail.com, or just hit me up on the DM. This episode and all episodes of the Golf Guru Show are produced by Joel North. Thank you, Joel, for your continued excellent work. And music was brought to you by Kevin McLeod and Zach Mullet, aka Cutta Beats. Leave me an iTunes review or rating. Let me know how I'm doing. Let's see if we can get this thing going. I really appreciate that. And as I leave you with, always, Mr. Rohn, RIP, study, practice, teach, and then pass it on. Thank you so much for listening. I'll talk to you next time.